And bam, just like that, we're live. Did you see that transition? It was so smooth.
Wait, no song, no theme song, no
No, I
introduction
didn't. I didn't
AI
have a theme
song.
song prepared. Um,
What kind of
yeah,
chicken crap outfit is this, Donnie?
I
What
know
are you
my
doing
show
to me,
sucks.
man?
Yeah, it's bullshit. My show sucks. Anyway,
So
welcome to my
disappointed.
show. Donny Cho says stuff. Back from several months hiatus. I started taking a break in September for a couple of reasons. One, it was just getting. I was Dave. I was making a different theme song for each episode,
Oh, wow. Okay.
and it was getting like with a full time job and everything. It was just getting kind of overwhelming, and um, and making like these goofy videos and all that. That was one, but also I got really obsessed with Baldur's Gate 3, Dungeons and
Ah,
Dragons,
okay.
and I needed
Yeah.
a couple months to just really dive in. But here I am. We've completed the game, finally finished it. And I wanted to start the first episode back with a bang. So
Yeah,
today I got a
and your
guest.
rash cleared up too.
Yeah,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah. No. There was no rash. There was never a rash. Yeah, we're good.
rash.
Continue.
What are you saying? What are you
Nothing.
implying? Where did my rash? Anyway. Oh, we got people. Oh, wow. People are in the chat. I forgot people actually watch my show sometimes.
Yeah, why? Why do you people watch this?
Detroit Rock City. Nice kid.
Yeah,
shirt.
likes my shirt. Yeah, actually, you can see it's actually a Music from the Elder shirt.
Oh, nice.
Those that
Nice.
know the Elder.
Penicillin is a marvelous drug. Anyway, so I decided to start my show off with a bang by inviting a guest, David Lucarelli, who I had the pleasure of meeting this past Tuesday on Paul Dale Roberts' show, the Waiting Room podcast, which I have the link in the description. It actually comes out in a few days, so check that out. And Dave, why don't you tell the audience a bit about yourself?
Okay.
And then we'll go right in.
Sure. My day job is that I'm an audio engineer, primarily an ADR mixer, voiceover recordist. So I work on television and film, and been working for The Simpsons for like the last 20 plus years. In addition to that, I record other stuff, audio books and podcasts and audio dramas. And then I'm also a comic book writer. So I'm primarily known for the Children's Vampire Hunting Brigade and Tinsel Town from Alternate Comics, and most recently, Dr. Zomba's Ghostly Tales.
Nice. Nice. So that's why I brought our good buddy here, Jason McLean, because he too can talk comics.
Yeah.
And plus, we can,
Mhm.
we can just kind of go wherever. Today we're just shooting the shit, just kind of hanging out, getting to know our new friend Dave here. And yeah, Jason, did you have
Run,
any?
Dave. Run away very fast.
Did you
It's
have
only going
any
to go downhill from here.
questions here? Yeah, yeah.
The only question is, why show up here, man? You look like a reasonable person. Get out while the getting's good.
In the paranormal world, I'm known as probably the biggest jack off.
Okay. I'm just a guy who can't say no. What can I say?
Yeah.
I understand that. Yeah, that's why I'm here, man. Let's be honest. Yeah, I get it. No, okay.
Yeah.
Well, you're one of those. I'm sorry. You're stuck then. Yeah. So, yeah. Alternate comics. I've actually seen. I haven't had a chance to read it, but I've like once I was like, oh, hold on, I like the name. Your name rang a bell. I couldn't remember why. I was kind of flipping through. Yeah, no. I'm interested in your work. So, how would you describe? Like, are you particularly Tinsel Town? How would you describe that to the world? I want people to interact with your stuff. Let's start there.
So Tinsel Town is a period crime drama about one of the first female cops in Hollywood. So it's kind of like LA Confidential meets Boardwalk Empire.
Okay.
In real life, my mom was a police officer, so it's also kind of my tribute to her. And
nice.
It's inspired by some historical circumstances. In the early sound era, Universal Studios had some of the first female police officers. They functioned as kind of a cross between lot security guards and people that were there to amuse and assist the tourists.
Mhm.
But they also weren't above marching them in short skirts and parades and things like that. So it was an interesting dichotomy.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, you must have, because there was some serious shit back in the day, like the very first female cops.
Oh yeah. Well,
Yeah.
it wasn't even easy for my mom in the 70s and the 80s. So, the further back you go, the easier it wasn't.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I get that.
Yep. No. So your other comic again was Dr. I'm terrible with names.
That's okay. So, there's two. There's the Children's Vampire Hunting Brigade, which is a coming-of-age Gothic adventure set in Scotland and Glasgow specifically. And it was set there because it was inspired by a real-life event. In the 1950s, hundreds of school kids descended upon this one cemetery looking for a 7-foot-tall vampire with iron teeth that they believe had abducted a couple of local children. And the incident took place over several nights. It was considered mass hysteria. And there's all kinds of reasons why that happened. There was a steel works that was adjacent to the cemetery that was, pumping smoke and red lights into the cemetery, gave it a very spooky atmosphere. The modern thinking is that what happened was there was kind of a boogeyman that was talked about, the Iron Man of the Gorbals, right? Because the cemetery,
the original Slender Man.
It's funny that you say that, because in a lot of ways, there's a lot of parallels between Slender Man and the Iron Man of the Gorbals, right? Because much like the internet, this cemetery was a place that school kids would go after school when they were unsupervised, working class neighborhood. And like the parents didn't really want them to go there because there were a bunch of criminals that hung out there and it was kind of a semi-dangerous place. So they would say, don't go there. The Iron Man of the Gorbals will get you. Well, at the time, the incident was blamed on comics, but there wasn't a specific comic that they could produce to cite. However, subsequently, in the last 10 years, there was an American comic called The Vampire with Iron Teeth that would have been from that period. So the current thinking is what they did is they, somebody put 2 and 2 together and conflated the Iron Man of the Gorbals with the Vampire with Iron Teeth and made up this story that caught on so much, it perhaps became a little bit of a mass hysteria. What's really interesting about that is sociologists have come and they've found some people that participated in it and interviewed them. They also heard from a whole bunch of other people that said, well, we didn't go to hunt the vampire. We went to hunt Iron Jack, or we went to hunt the White Lady, or we went to hunt, this other ghost. So what you have is this neighborhood that has a multi-generational predilection for hunting imaginary monsters,
right?
And, so to me, I find it absolutely fascinating.
And I've got I pulled a.
Oh,
and this
there you
is
go.
it right here.
Yep, that's it.
Amazon, actually.
Yeah, that's volume 2. There's 3 volumes. If you go to Abacab Studios on Etsy, you can get autographed in a nice limited edition slipcase, all 3 volumes. But yeah, I went there actually twice as a guest of Glasgow Comic-Con. I got to see the area where it took place, got to incorporate some of the people I met, some of the things I saw in the subsequent volumes. Another cool thing, because I know you guys are into strange phenomena, there's a statue there called the Statue of the White Lady. And there's a legend that surrounds that is kind of like the equivalent to Bloody Mary, where they say if you walk around the statue 3 times and you say, white lady, white lady, white lady, she supposedly comes alive and kills you. So we tried that. It didn't work, but I did get a good story out of it. So
there you go. See, It seems like that's one of those things where it's like, what's the upside of this? Is like we're gonna try it out because the upside of this is getting murdered. Like we like
is there
anything
a
else.
specific time of day you had to do it, like at like midnight or 3 a.m. or something?
They didn't get that specific. I mean, I guess it's like Mount Everest. You know why it was there. I mean,
Yeah. Oh, of course. Well, it's like there's a story here I put in one of my in my book. So North Texas has like a ton of Goatman mythology and stories, right?
Okay.
Long stories to how that happens, right?
Yeah.
But there's one out in Johnson County. Literally, the bridge is called Old Foamy. Again, long stories to how that happens. So the Goatman there is literally just nicknamed Old Foamy, and of course you're supposed to drive up, flash your lights 3 times, or turn off your car and then flash the engine or the lights 3 times, and then Old Foamy shows up and destroys your car.
Okay.
And I'm like, what? And of course I'm sitting here looking. It's like, why would you risk that? That's the whole point. Like, it's like, yeah, he's gonna come and scrape and destroy your car. What's the upside here? Like, this feels poorly thought out as far as as far as mythologies go. That's all I'm saying.
That said, did you try it?
Oh no.
No. Oh, okay.
I like my car. That's what I'm saying. Like, I like my car. Why would I bother, man?
Novir calls it an insurance scam.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, see,
that would make sense.
I'm originally from Pittsburgh, and that reminds me of one that's local to Pittsburgh. Have you guys heard of the Green Man?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the Green Man is a guy that supposedly was in some kind of electrical accident, and he touched a hot wire or whatever, and his face slid off, and he turned green. And actually, I've researched him. Apparently, he was a historical figure that was involved in and was horribly disfigured, and he was seen in the kind of greater area outside of Pittsburgh because he would kind of lived in an isolated life and would be wandering about and stuff. He never like threatened anybody. If anything, people like weren't necessarily kind to him. But this was a legend that like kids growing up in Pittsburgh heard about and knew. And so we went out, of course, looking for the Green Man. And okay, so en route to where the Green Man was supposed to be, there's this tunnel that's called Cadillac Tunnel that has its own little legend about it, because there's almost a 90-degree turn in the middle of the tunnel, and it's a two-way street, but the width of the tunnel is like one car width, right? So the idea is that you're supposed to honk your horn and pause outside the tunnel and wait, and if you don't hear anything back, then you've got clearance and you can go through the tunnel. And the legend surrounding that is that on prom night at this high school once years ago, these drunk teenagers in matching Cadillacs were speeding through, and they didn't stop, and they like had a head-on collision in the curve of the tunnel, and they all died. So, okay, you go through that tunnel, which does exist, to get to where the Green Man is supposed to be. And we go there, and there is like a man-made cave, and from a distance, it does appear to be glowing green. So
interesting.
We went there, and what it is it was kind of a man-made, like, shallow cave for some reason. And there was a hole in the ceiling of the cave that allowed moonlight to come through. And there were huge piles of rock salt that had been stacked in the cave. So when the moonlight hits the rock salt, it kind of glows green, like bright outside the cave. It's like one of those places that teenagers go to party and make out and stuff. The other thing that was interesting about it was that there were a couple of human-sized cages in the cave, right? Which kind of freaked everybody out too. Nobody really knows what the origin of that was or what they were doing there.
Damn.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, here's the torture cages. Why do you call them? No reason. No. Okay. Yeah. That's one of my favorite things is when you start getting into the actual lore of a lot of these stories. There's a lot of themes that are older themes, but there's always, or rather often, something that's the sort of initiating event that and sometimes it's there, sometimes it isn't, or sometimes it's a general idea that just gets placed on it, and that's often more fun and telling than the stories themselves. But that's interesting. I'd heard of the Green Man, but I hadn't heard about the cars or anything. It's one of those things you collect as you're going in our in our world, our little nick of our little niche of insanity that we live in.
I got into this stuff because I stumbled
Mhm.
on this book, The Choking Doberman, by Jan Harold Brunvand. I guess that's how
Mhm.
you pronounce that. And he's like collects urban legends. So he's written like that and Curses Broiled Again and the Baby Train and other lusty urban legends. So, if you're listening to the show and you're interested in this kind of stuff, this is a great place to start.
Interesting.
There's another one that I just was reminded of. My family used to vacation in North Carolina, right?
Mhm.
And there's an island off the coast called Ocracoke Island, and there's an urban legend called the Flaming Ship of Ocracoke. And real quick, there's a captain and his crew that used to be pirates, but now they've reformed and they're trying to go straight. And they find out that there's a bunch of really rich guys and ladies that are going to be using their boat to go to Ocracoke Island, and they're moving and they're going to have all of their money and jewels and gold with them, right? And they think to themselves, okay, this is too good an opportunity to pass up, right? We gotta take advantage of this. And so they come up with this plan. What we're gonna do is we're gonna wait until everybody goes to sleep. We're gonna slit everybody's throats, set the boat on fire, and we're gonna leave in the dinghy with all of their gold and treasure loaded up. And so they do that, and as they're doing it, the wind shifts. And so the flaming ship, like that they're trying to row away from, sets their dinghy on fire and burns all the pirates to death.
Oh, wow.
And so they say on like nights with a full moon, you can see the flaming ship of Ocracoke heading out to the island. And the reason why you can see it is because there is a type of red phosphorus type of plankton that, again, reflected by the moonlight, tends to
Yeah.
carried towards the island in the waves at a certain time of night. And so that's another one.
So, quick question then: did that event actually happen, or is that or is that a story that was sort of created with the mythology?
Yeah, as far as I know, that's just a story that they came up with that fits the actual,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Cool. Yeah, because that's one of those things that's also interesting. Is like sometimes, again, there is a precipitating event,
right?
But it may not be but it's so different from what the story is, in that it has, as the lore it gets passed down, you're like, oh, okay, like, yeah, I can see how you get from there to there, but there's this transition where they're just making it a cool story for for there to be the thing. So that's that's always in it. Like again, the old Alton Bridge Goat Man, which is the big one that everyone knows, here in North Texas. That story's changed over the years.
Okay.
As far as how we get the Goat Man, but and none of them seem to be legitimate as far as the event. But it is true that a lot of these old iron truss bridges were used for hangings.
Mm-hmm.
So it's one of those things where they kind of like, there's a reason to think, people did get hanged there, like criminals and whatnot were hanged, suicides, things like that. But then there's this story that's really just a hanging man story, because the hanged man mythology goes back thousands of years, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's like they took the hanged man story, which is like nearly every iron truss bridge in North America has one of, it's virtually all the same story. But then it's like, but because they were used as devices for hangings, like there's this other, then people make this other story about it, right? So it's like, it sort of grows and becomes its own thing. It's like, it's not that there wasn't something that occurred, it's just not what the story is.
Yeah, and actually that story about sort of human sacrifice when you build a bridge can be traced back even further to ancient rites of, the story I heard is the song itself, London Bridge is falling down, My Fair Lady, is like remnants of, whatever, the Celtics, the Druids, I don't know, the pre-England, where they would build a bridge, and they wanted it to stand, and they wanted to please the river gods, so they would sacrifice a virgin at the base of the bridge so that the bridge held.
Sounds about right. Honest, I've heard crazier things.
Yeah.
So yeah, but yeah, it's like in these these sort of stories and memories get passed down to us, and then they just sort of take on their own mythology. But we're 20 minutes into this. Donnie, what did you want? We've sort of monopolized. What would you like to discuss?
Well, when David and I were on last time, we were starting to talk about how people manifest, or the idea of artists such as yourselves potentially manifesting their creations, them seeing apparitions of like characters that
life imitating art. Yes.
Right.
And you had started to tell me a story, and we got cut off. So I want to hear the rest of that story.
And Jason, I told Dave the story you told me about Alan Moore actually seeing John Constantine walk into the bar.
Constantine, sir. Constantine.
He always does that.
Yes. Well, you kind of have to. It's not just Alan Moore. There were a couple others. I just forgot their names. Again,
other people saw him.
Yeah, other people who have who particularly during the Vertigo run of Hellblazer. Yeah, there were other writers working on it at the time and they all say the same thing. It was him. It wasn't someone who looks like John Constantine. It was Constantine. And they looked at him, they made eye contact, and it's like they knew that he was beckoning them to go with them, and they've all said, nope, because we're writing these stories and we know how crazy they go. I don't want any part of this. And they always leave.
I didn't know he was like beckoning them to like follow him.
Well, it wasn't like he was. Everyone said it wasn't like that. Like he's over there smoking a cigarette and being like, "Let's go." It was all they made eye contact, and it's like, that's John Constantine. This is the actual person I'm writing about. And like, there's this unspoken invitation, and they're like, "Yeah, no, we're done." Like it's like, I'm out. And that's the thing is they're very, very clear. This isn't someone who looks like him. This isn't like the real human being that they're writing about. They're like, no, it is the comic book character, John Constantine, that we are actually like, somehow he's in the real world, but it's the actual character that they're writing about, and has somehow manifested himself into our reality.
Well, have you guys read the relatively recently published book by Alan Moore, the bumper book, the Grand Egyptian bumper book of magic? And
no, I haven't read it yet.
Okay, highly recommended. By the way, I mean it's really an interesting book, and Alan Moore talks about other kinds of similar manifestations, like his friend Steve Moore, I believe, like supposedly manifested a spirit of a woman, that was kind of his girlfriend or whatever. And like Alan Moore said that he could see her, like, physically see her, even though she wasn't like a flesh and blood human being, but he could see the spirit of her sitting next to him. And I've also heard Alan Moore talk about what was the thing at JBL with Jack Parsons, was it? Yeah, who was a Satanist, and he supposedly also manifested like a woman or romantic interest for himself that may or may not have been physically real before he managed to blow himself up. But yeah.
Parsons is that's an interesting story. It was Neil Gaiman also says that he's seen Constantine.
And Neil Gaiman also told a story about how he was on a plane that got grounded, that, like had to make an emergency landing because somebody died on the plane. And he was exiting the plane, he saw a woman that looked exactly like death, and
yes.
Yeah, and he said, like,
what do you mean by she looked like death? Like,
well, the traditional Susie and the Banshees death from Sandman vision of what death is supposed to look like that he created.
Oh,
yeah. I just realized that it probably needs a little more context.
Right. Sorry, we're assuming people know what we're talking about.
Yeah. Donnie, actually, you may want to pull that up because it's a very unique look. So if he's saying he saw that woman, like it's not something.
What should I type in?
Sandman death, and but look for the
Neil
comic
Gaiman's
version. She's
Sandman
all
Death.
Comic
Oh.
book, yeah.
Yeah, comic.
Oh,
yeah,
the character of death from his actual works. Oh.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah.
It's a very distinctive look.
This was after Sandman was already a very popular book, so it could have been somebody that was either a Susie and the Banshees fan or a fan of Sandman. You know, who knows?
Yeah. While he's looking that up, I just again, I'm terrible with names. The guy who wrote all of the old Shadow pulps, the Shadow,
William Gibson.
Yes, William Gibson.
Yeah.
One of the things that has been like that dude was knocking out like 6 of these pulps a week sometimes. It was nuts. That man was insane. There is been a long-standing story that his home is haunted by a man with a black hat and cape.
Okay.
Like people have been who've lived in his house after his death said there is a man that haunts this place, but he's got a black hat, black cloak, and a lot of people are like that. Sounds like he's somehow again. Like the shadow is there in that house. And the guy who originally played Shazam or Captain Marvel, because Shazam comes later.
Yeah.
But the original Captain Marvel in the serials, where he's buried, people have said that they've gone out there and they've seen Captain Marvel walking around.
Tom Tyler.
Yeah, Tom Tyler. Yeah. And they don't see Tom Tyler, they see Captain Marvel.
Okay, that's interesting. I was in England with my father, and we were on the subway, like to stop off at 221 B Baker Street, which is the home of Sherlock Holmes. And my dad.
Real quick, sorry. This is death right here.
That is death. Yes,
yep, that's her.
He saw her.
Wow. Yeah. And my dad's a big Sherlockian, guy. And now, granted, when Arthur Conan Doyle wrote the book, there wasn't actually an address of 221B Baker Street. It didn't exist, but they've subsequently made one that's kind of a museum that's designed to look like what he describes Holmes's study as looking like. And fun fact, if you go back through the Sherlock Holmes stories, sometimes Sherlock's address changes because Arthur Conan Doyle just wasn't super big on continuity and he couldn't be bothered to look it back up again. Anyhow, but the one that's usually referenced is 221B Baker Street. And there was a guy on the subway with us who was totally done up in the deerskin cap with the pipe and the clothes that Sherlock is typically depicted in. Again, probably just a Sherlockian, fan that was going the same place we were. But, there is a part of you that can't help but think in the back of your mind, well, that's interesting.
Yeah. Well, so that's interesting because there's sort of there's two sides to the story, right? We've got the stories of what appear to be fictional characters manifesting in some way or another, right?
Right.
But these are clearly metaphysical events that we're describing. However, the fact that 221B Baker Street didn't actually exist, but now it physically exists as a place that you can go visit. Right. And it's where it should be if it were to actually exist. It's that's just as valid a manifestation of a fictional thing as anything is, because it's a real thing that exists now.
In fact, there's an Alan Moore story in which he talks about multiverses and stuff. And he says, just as there is a universe in which Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn really lived, there's a universe in which Superman flew through the sky, and there's a universe in which Tarzan lived with the apes. And, he kind of talks about that whole thing. If you believe in the possibility of infinite possibilities, infinite universes, then anything that you could possibly conceive of must exist on some level.
Yep. Yeah. So that's one of those theories out there. And the alternative version of this is, in a way, again, we have had this conversation because Donny is a Buddhist, and in our little neck of the world, the word tulpa has been sort of usurped, right, from Buddhism and given this whole other. It's wearing the skin of the tulpa as a concept, right, to sort of give it credence. But the idea of the thought form, right, where there's enough people thinking about a thing, or there's enough interest in a thing, somehow it, in some way, it makes it real in a way. So it's like, is it, are people plucking these things out of these alternative timelines, or is our collective understanding somehow affecting the reality around us? Probably the most recent example of that that's really kind of odd, and it sounds hilarious. I don't know if you have kids. Have you ever heard of Phineas and Ferb from Disney? Yeah, okay. Yeah. If y'all haven't seen it, it's a great show. It really was. My kids loved it. I loved it. Songs were hilarious. There's a character in there called Perry the Platypus, and he's their pet platypus that also has these alternative adventures where he wears a fedora. It's hilarious. Yeah. But the platypus is colored this teal aqua green instead of brown. It is the most ridiculous thing you've ever seen. However, after that show, I mean, that show's old now. They actually just did a revival of it. But like 2 or 3 years ago, they discovered that a platypus will fluoresce this almost identical teal green color under fluorescent lighting. Like when you look, like they will actually fluoresce that color, and everyone just kind of you just looked and it's like, okay, is this like no one knew that was a thing. Yeah, no one had any clue, and that's this color that they just randomly chose for the thing. So the question becomes, okay, did somehow all of these children and fans watching this show, having that put into their head, did that somehow affect reality to the point where now they do this thing, right? Where now these, or was it that this was something, this was a grand truth of reality, right? Mm-hmm. That somehow they accidentally through art, through their art picked up on, and that's why they did it. Is that on some, again, metaphysical level, that was a truth that was plucked out of the air and put in there.
That makes me think of another one for you here. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with taxi dancers, right? Like the whole idea, it kind of sprang up out of World War II, I want to say. There are these clubs where you would go and you would pay a girl like that worked there like a dime to dance with you, and if you paid her a little extra, you might be able to go off in the corner and make out or whatever, and that kind of thing. It was sort of this liminal gray area. It's not exactly prostitution. What it really is, still vestiges of it exist today, actually in Texas and California. And what it ends up being is the people that go there typically are people that have just come to the country and don't necessarily speak English. They're immigrants, and they're looking for a little human companionship, a nice warm body to dance with, somebody that will say nice things to them, but they don't want to necessarily go into a strip club, and they, that kind of thing. And so that's sort of what a taxi dance club is. And so there's an urban legend amongst the taxi dancers that you never leave with anybody, any customer that comes into the taxi dance club, because if you do, they will hug you, and then you will notice that you're bleeding, and then you'll notice that the person that hugged you has a tail, and then you'll notice that it will turn out that the stranger who was handsome and good looking is actually Satan, and he's come to, take you away or whatever. And there actually was a serial killer that was targeting taxi dancers specifically, that, and so again, it's that whole chicken and egg thing. Obviously the management was going to discourage these girls to ever go home with anybody that came in. The people that come in are sort of a little bit liminal. Probably most of them are very nice, but there's also the possibility that some of them could be dangerous or unhinged, and in at least one case there was, so yeah, again, it's another one of those, did the truth manifest based on the legend, or was the legend a survival story that was born out of these women's fears?
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of stuff like that. And it kind of goes back to, we can actually tie a lot of these concepts together of, the mythology being inspired by a true event kind of thing, and artists perhaps plucking these things out of reality. Like, is there a real Tarzan? Well, probably not as described by Edgar Rice Burroughs, but maybe there was someone, right? And that is a thing that again, on some artistic level, is plucked out of that ether that some have purported, and then the stories are born out of that truth. So it's not that they're like the Tarzan is doing the things that he's describing, but there was someone in a very similar situation that he, on some instinctual level, is sort of out there. It's not that there's a guy necessarily dressed up like the Shadow. There's no Lamont Cranston running around dual wielding 1911s, although that would be cool. But rather, perhaps there is something out there in the ether that was plucked, and now that is the artist is now rendering this into its own mythology, right?
Well, like there's a couple of figures that Zorro was inspired, kind of based on, that were sort of gentleman bandits that were, taking money from, or trying to keep California Mexican and not let it be taken over by the United States, that kind of thing. And I actually, there's 2 blocks from here, there's Runyon Canyon, and there's this whole like outpost sign that tells the backstory that this was the hiding place of one of these guys that was the main inspiration for Zorro. And so it's kind of like finding out that Batman was a real guy and he fought crime in your neighborhood 2 blocks from where you live,
Yeah. Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah.
I think that leads me to the story I was trying to tell you.
Yes.
Jason, I already told you this story before, but we were talking about Robert E. Howard, right? How he lived in this pretty modest home in rural Texas. And everyone knows him as being the author of Conan the Barbarian, right? He's the creator of that.
And Solomon Kane.
Kane. And he apparently would be terrorized at night by a shadow figure that would like loom over him. Kind of like, when you have sleep paralysis, and then when you experience sleep paralysis, you feel like there's a presence in the room, right? Well, this guy kind of grew up with that, and he lived with that, and it happened to him on a regular basis, which it kind of makes sense, because if you look into the guy's history, like his life, he was kind of like a shut-in, a weird dude, right?
Yeah.
Apparently, this shadow figure would loom over him as he was sitting at his typewriter typing, and he would report that he felt like if he stopped typing, whatever this thing was going to get him. So he kept writing and writing and writing until he realized he was writing that figure's story. And what he eventually came out with was Conan the Barbarian.
Have you guys ever seen the movie Whole Wide World?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so it's about him, and it's co-stars a young Renee Zellweger. It's a really good movie, actually. Studio I was worked on it. Yeah, it's about Robert E. Howard, and there's a great line in it where she says something like, "I don't know where you get these ideas for stories." They're like looking out at this cornfield, and it goes, "I just don't see it. You've got heroes and monsters and dragons and warriors, and where do you get that from?" And he goes, you look out there, you don't see it. He goes, "You just ain't looking hard enough."
By the way, just out of curiosity, who did they get to play Robert E. Howard?
I knew you were going to ask me that. You have to look it up, because I don't remember off the top of my head.
Wikipedia it right now, thanks to the internet.
Yeah, do that real quick. Can you put because I think this question is about the picture from Robert E. Howard.
Oh yeah.
It says, "Is that Nemovir asks if that's a porch?" No. That's honestly just how homes were. If you can pull it up, like he grew up again, very, very rural South Texas.
Sorry.
Yeah.
They casted the exact actor that I thought that they should have cast, Vincent D'Onofrio.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. Robert E. Howard. That makes a lot of sense. Okay.
Yeah, worth a watch. Yeah, if you can put the picture back up, it would look like a porch to us, kind of, but that's really how South Texas homes look, particularly very, very old. Like, you have to remember, Robert E. Howard is writing a very long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
That there was no such thing as air conditioning,
right,
at all, and it's all made out of wood. That, trust me when I tell you, he just lived in a very small home. It's rural South Texas. That's what that's going to look like, just 100%.
So the thing that fascinated me in particular about this story is the detail of Conan, or the setting, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you recall the original movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger, what's the opening line, right? Back after the oceans drank Atlantis,
Mm-hmm.
but before the rise of the sons of Arias, right? So what he's talking about is the time when Atlantis sank to the rise of the sons of Arias. Is essentially, he's talking about the start of the Bronze Age, the Sumerians, right? So if you go by like what people who like to talk about the Younger Dryas, people like
Mm-hmm.
Graham Hancock, the consensus is, if there wasn't Atlantis and if it did sink, it would have been about 11,000 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay, because that's when the asteroid hit, it caused all this glacial melt, which caused the ocean levels to rise, right? And they believed that human civilization had reached a certain point. Younger Dryas occurs, everything goes underwater, and then from 11,000 or 10,000 BC to about 3,500 is when we know the Sumerians came about, which is, according to mainstream archaeology, the first real human civilization.
Yeah.
There's a 7,500 year gap where we know nothing about human history, right? That's the time period that Conan is supposed to take place.
Yeah, the Hyperborean age.
The funny little detail about Robert E. Howard, he was really into all that Younger Dryas Atlantis stuff. Back in the 1930s, when nobody even knew about that. Like, there was alien people now, but there were societies who talked about it, but it wasn't like mainstream like people talk about it nowadays. Yeah, people like cars.
Right. Yeah. No, there was gonna be my little pushback. Is there were, but the area that the ancient astronaut theoreticians sort of inhabit today, right? During the late 1800s, early 1900s, that was all Atlantis. Like, that was, it's literally all the same mythology. It's gone from Atlanteans and these hyper advanced humans that were lost to now it's UFOs and aliens. There was this little time during the early-ish 1900s where it became about the Aryans, and we can move on past that one. But yeah, it's essentially all of the ancient astronaut stuff that in the assumptions and claims that we get today. That was all Atlantis back in the late 1800s, even mid 1800s, up through the very early 1900s. It was very much Atlantis and that concept.
And so that's what the Hyperborean age is supposed to be, right? After Atlantis, before Sumeria.
Yep.
And the fact that this being was standing over him, being like, write my story, makes you wonder if there really was a Conan.
Could be. I mean, again, this goes back to that's sort of the question that you posed, right? Is how are we creating reality with these stories? Are we simply pulling something out of reality, like an alternative timeline, or do our events, do our lives leave some sort of metaphysical imprint on reality that artists are picking up on in some way and are translating through our art stories that are continuing these events from the past or alternative timelines or whatever. That's the question that's being posed.
Right, which leads to an interesting question. Would you ever not write about something in one of your stories because you're worried that it might have some kind of future impact upon reality?
That's a great question. I actually know people who have expressed that very fear.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't want to write about it because if I do it, it could come true or something. It's sort of the same thing of the person who doesn't want to go to the doctor to get tested to see if they have cancer, because then the cancer would be real.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like it's on that instinctual level. It's like, well, if I don't know that I have it, then it's not real. But if it becomes real, then it can kill me, kind of idea. But I've met artists who are like, I don't want to interact with this material for fear of it becoming real in some way. So yeah, I think that's a valid question, because let's throw one more little shrimp on this metaphysical Barbie here. What if the shadow figure is again, taking the thought form concept, what if that's Conan, like as we've interacted with it and all of that, retroactively being pushed back through time to him? So yes, he is, where he's the impression that he's getting, this force that he's getting, is him interacting with a future, the future that we are living in, where we've interacted with Conan. We have these stories, and he is that thing, and that's pushing him to create him in the first place.
Right, which that brings up a point that Alan Moore's talked about, which is that on a subatomic level, right? When scientists are studying quarks and whatnot, that they find that they seem to behave differently whether they're being observed or not, right? And then if you take Alan Moore's theory that essentially the past, present, and future are, as concepts, are illusions, and that everything is happening simultaneously, then we can't actually study the past without influencing it and changing it.
Yeah.
And that kind of goes to what you were talking about, which is maybe Robert E. Howard was creating the real Conan's past by virtue of writing about him.
Yeah. Yeah. That's that. And again, as I say, often, we ain't got the Spookatron 5000 patent pending. Yeah. So, we can't really, there's no way to objectively observe, the metaphysical, the supernatural, whatever word you want to use. Yeah. So it's not really a question that we can answer, but it is one of those questions that I think on some level, a lot of creatives do interact with, almost instinctually. I have found.
Yeah. No, I definitely have found that, like, when I write certain things and then I later observe some kind of manifestation, not so specific as to be necessarily a character that I created staring me back in the face, but there are things that make me think, like, well, maybe I'm experiencing that because I intuitively knew that was a likely future potential occurrence, or which maybe something that I did has had some influence that's hard to quantify.
Yeah. But a great example of this is the movie Armageddon.
Okay.
Right. With I know it's like, you mean the bad version of Deep Impact? That movie was brilliant. It has miners going into space. It's wonderful. But no, the opening scene of that movie, right, where New York is getting pummeled with meteorites, when it's panning out after the Chrysler Building was the one that collapsed, the Twin Towers are there. Smoke is billowing literally from where the planes were hit on 9/11. Like, go back and watch it. It is like, you see that they had been hit by meteorites, and literally the smoke are literally where they were hit. a lot of people noticed that like immediately after, like, hey, this movie came out like what 2 or 3 years prior to 9/11. Everyone just went immediately, what the heck's going on there? Again,
yeah. There's a lot of weird coincidences around 9/11 where similar imagery of planes flying into the towers and the towers being on fire, like, preceded 9/11, and even just weird things where if you were a writer, you would say, well, I wouldn't do that because that's too on the nose, or that just seems, that begs credulity. But, I remember there was one guy that was like a search and rescue guy or a doctor that was driving into the city to help, when they still thought there were going to be, survivors that needed help at 9/11. And like his license plate was literally 9/11, and a series of letters, but like just weird things like that where you go, wow, that's,
Yeah. Now, this goes back to the question that someone posted when I mentioned, Perry the platypus thing and platypi actually, fluorescing teal. And it's like, well, what if it's a coincidence, right? And again, absolutely true, right? Coincidences happen. People are like, oh, I don't believe it. No, coincidences happen. Trust me, they do. Right. That having been said, maybe, like, we don't know, but that's the question is but there's no way, again, we don't know if it's a coincidence or not. We just have to kind of look at this and say, I mean, maybe it's just a coincidence, but maybe there is more going on to this.
That reminds me, Jason, you got to tell Dave the xenomorph story.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
This is a good one.
Wait, how in depth do you want me to get? Do you want with what happened here or?
I'm
asking Donnie like which version he wants me to go because okay, so I'll start with here. I didn't put it in the book for reasons, but there was an event here where I live. People known to me, but like they didn't know that this was happening. They came to me separately because they knew what I did, right? A particular individual was having night terrors, things like that, and he was seeing, the things coming in, the whole 9 yards, right? And his daughter saw this dark figure go into his room one night. Someone who lived next door saw one night out front a creature that was described to me that sounded like almost exactly like a xenomorph, but it had eyes and but it had like big, large eyes and just like long razor sharp teeth kind of thing. It was red, right? So,
but otherwise a xenomorph from David.
Otherwise a xenomorph, and it's like okay, and it was outside his house, and it was standing in the light of a street lamp, right? Later on, another person saw a similar creature back behind the house. However, it was, again, next to it because the fence had blown down and the dogs were barking. They went out there to look on the dogs and they saw the creature and they described it the same way. These two people did not talk to one another. And these people did not know about what was going on inside that house. So reach out to some people that I know in this field. And they're like, yeah, actually, I've got other accounts of something that sounds very, very similar to this thing that you're describing.
Okay.
It clearly, whatever this is metaphysical. I'm like, man, I'm like, okay, well, maybe this is somehow related to, aliens, right? Maybe that's just, the movie, the xenomorphs and the thing. The problem is one of the people was a young girl who had not interacted with aliens, right?
Sure.
Like, too young for it and wasn't even interested in that kind of stuff. So it's like, okay, that's a little weird. So I start digging because I remembered it's something that itching in the back of my head about H.R. Geiger. There was a story that it was like in the back of my head and I couldn't, so I had to look it back up. Geiger himself said that his designs, that these biomechanical designs that he was creating and was famous for, long and short, it was sort of a result of a of his interactions with drugs and the occult.
Mm-hmm.
So it sort of creates this question of, was he, not that he was manifested, but was his drug fueled interactions and occult interactions with these beings that he said were absolutely real? Was he being inspired by that to design the xenomorph that way?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not that the xenomorph is this thing that actually exists or exists now, but rather that it is a metaphysical creature that he's encountered on some level, and and it's become translated into our reality, almost given, maybe not given form, but now there's a conduit for this thing to exist as a way that we interact with it, if that makes sense. Like, because again, what if these metaphysical creatures may not have form the way we would know them, right? Because they're something else, but that we have to give them form culturally. And so what he did by interacting with these things and then creating the xenomorph, he's just rendering what he was seeing.
Sure.
In now there's a conduit for these things to manifest in sort of a true form sort of concept.
Now millions of people are interacting with it because they're watching the movies and they're getting into the genre, and because more people are actively thinking about it, right, they're causing it to manifest in a more concrete way in this side of the veil.
Right. Well, it comes to that, back to that age-old question, where do ideas come from? Are we antennas that are simply channeling into something else that's giving us our ideas, or are they internally generated, through our own imaginations? And ultimately nobody really knows. That story reminded me, I read a biography of Aleister Crowley, and there was an interview that he did where the interviewer said, you've written all these books and you've talked about all of these interesting creatures that you've seen or whatever, but most of the time that you talk about them, you seem to have been heavily under the influence of drugs and hallucinogens and whatnot. And they said, have you ever seen anything magical with your own eyes when you were completely sober? And Aleister Crowley said, one time when I was alone in the woods, out of the corner of my eye, for an instant, I caught a glimpse of a wood nymph. And that was it.
Yeah. I mean, it's, who was it? I can't remember who. I think it was probably Keel who wrote about this, or he used the term, but it may not be native to him. I interact the most with it on with Joshua Cutchin's material. So again, as I've said 100 times, I'll say 1,000 times more, particularly for chat. If you're not interacting with Joshua Cutchin's material, you are very much behind the curve on this entire realm. He's probably one of the most important thinkers in the Fortean realms, who's active right now. But he talks about the imaginal realm. Like, that's actually the words that he uses, because in our parlance, we would almost say that's almost derisive because you're saying that these things aren't real. And he would say, no. There is some level where this stuff is real on its own. Mm-hmm. But our imagination and our idea of consciousness does seem to interact with that on that realm and on that level. And while I kind of bristle at calling them imaginal, because it sort of implies that it's an unreality, it may be a truer statement that this is real, right? That that our imaginations are interacting with reality on a level that we are not fully cognizant of.
Yeah.
That we may be co-creating a degree of reality. Again, reality is reality, but reality may have there may be some pliableness there, that particularly in the metaphysical realm that we're unaware of, but every culture on the planet has said, hey, this is a thing y'all probably shouldn't be messing with a little too often, right?
Right.
Like every culture was like, this is a real thing. Probably don't play with this. And we're like, please, we got cell phones. We know better than y'all.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's like, I work on The Simpsons, and they talk about how many times over the lifespan of The Simpsons that the show seems to have predicted things that have come to pass. And, I know when you have a show that has more than 400, 500 episodes, and each episode has an A, B, C, D plot, and then all kinds of other, random asides, just like a stopped clock is right twice a day, eventually they're going to get some things right just by, sheer probability, because you've got young, smart people that are forward thinking and are thinking about what the future may hold. So there are going to be, some times where it seems like, wow, they really nailed that one. How could they possibly have known? And the truth is, they probably didn't know. But again, it's a gray area.
Yeah.
Do people that you work with, do they often joke about that? Or does that ever get brought up at work?
They're aware of it, sure. I don't think any of them take it too seriously or think that they have some magical ability to predict the future, but they're definitely aware of those videos. I mean, the video of Trump coming down the escalator on The Simpsons or whatnot that's been cited, that video actually came out after the video, the real thing happened. So that's like one of those, but there are some other ones that are kind of like that for sure.
Maybe, people don't think about it like this, but maybe creativity is a form of psychic ability. We don't see it as a psychic ability because most people have a very limited definition of what psychic abilities are. I see. My argument is always that, how people say everyone's psychic to a different degree. I think that there are different definitions of, like, I think we need to rethink our definition of what psychic abilities actually entail or what they're limited to. For example, right? I'm big into comedy and making people laugh. And I personally believe that the ability to make people laugh is a form of psychic ability because you can force people to be happy against their will.
Right. Which is why comedy and horror have so much in common, because they're both eliciting sort of unself-controlled, controllable reactions.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's an interesting way of looking at it. I've always definitely said that we're supernatural creatures, right? Like we are by nature. That's what we are. And there's that reality. I think that's a good point to say that maybe we need to redefine what psychic abilities even are. Like what does that even entail? I've said this, for years now. If you went back in time 600 years and tried to explain germ theory to anyone, they'd look at you like you're an idiot. Not because they were stupid, but because there was no concept of something so small you couldn't see it, right?
Right.
We're on the edge of probably this next great discovery about how this universe actually works. And there may be something that's not even on the table yet as far as how this place actually works. And once we've made that discovery, it's like, oh, this all makes a lot more sense in retrospect. And it may be that, that again, what we would consider psychic power manifests in ways that perhaps we were unaware of.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's also like that argument that, although the concept of aliens and alien sightings is relatively recent, other sightings of unknown creatures like fairies and elves and things like that are actually quite ancient, and that may simply have been the prism through which they could understand or try to make sense of this unknown creature that they were interacting with.
Yep. Well, which then begs the question, what makes us think we're right about it now?
Right.
It's like, because again, 200 years ago or 300 years, 400, it was fae and elves and goblins, and then it becomes honestly Atlanteans and things like that. Then in post World War II, they became aliens, right? And UFOs. It's like
it became all technology based.
Yeah, it became it became technology based. The question becomes, what if this is just this new form isn't more real than the prior ones? It's just this is what our culture is expecting, so this is how it's going to present itself to us.
Yeah. And sometimes it's a matter too of, we fill in the blanks for things that we can't understand. Just as long, like for instance, that you mentioned goblins. There's a ruin in Scotland called the Goblin Ha, which is this castle ruin that I've been to. It's actually kind of like in the middle, off to the side of a golf course, but you can go there and see it. And the reason why they thought that it was built by goblins is because it like basically sprang up, like, if not overnight, it was built so fast that they thought that it couldn't possibly have been done by humans. Now, historically, what the other possible explanation for how that occurred is that it was somebody who imported slaves and slave labor into Scotland and had the slaves build it. And because that wasn't like common at the time, the people came up with their own explanations of what had actually occurred.
Yeah. Again, there's a precipitating event, and then there's a story that that's inspired. It may not necessarily connect to what really happened, but the story and the mythology then becomes the dominant lore, and in a way creates how we're interacting with all of this material.
Yes. When in doubt, print the legend.
Yeah. Well, so while Donnie's looking at something else, I actually want to go back and recollect the old, not the old, Denny O'Neil, when he redid the Question, the series, The Question in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
There is a section in that story where he's interacting with, I can't remember if it's his cousin or his brother, who's a comic book artist, right? And there's this conversation there about, about how comic books won World War II. And the point that Denny was sort of making was, again, it was actually more of a metaphysical one, saying that the comics were writing about our victory over Hitler for years, right? And that in a sense, the artists made it happen because we created the story, people believed in the story, and so the story bore out, right?
Right.
It's sort of the concept that Denny was playing with that story. And it begs the question, no pun intended, is that how, which kind of ties this whole thing. It's like, how much does art change the story? It doesn't have to be visual art, but it is it's as long as we've been human beings, we've created art.
Sure.
We've told stories. Historians will tell you when a culture loses the story about themselves and they lose that story, the civilization dies, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Cultures make the greatest leaps technologically, sociologically, their prosperity, when there is this story about themselves that they believe and that they're acting out, right?
Right.
So it comes back to the stories, as storytellers, what level of reality are we interacting with? Is it just that, okay, we believe in the people it gives people a unifying story and so they do it, or is there a metaphysical truth there that people are, again, I don't like necessarily the whole new age manifesting concept, but is it possible that there is some truth to that where it's like, no, we're going to just make it happen and reality follows suit,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
That there is there's a metaphysical reaction to it, or is it just that the story has been plucked out of the ether or out of history and we're just playing that story out, right?
Right.
Again, chicken egg? What if it's both?
Mhm.
Right?
Well, I mean, yeah, obviously Kirby famously drew the picture of Captain America punching out Hitler before the U.S. had even joined World War II, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And that also calls to mind the story about how I guess it would have been the FBI or the CIA that like went to DC Comics when the Superman radio show was like the #1 radio show, particularly in the South. And they said, we are worried about the KKK and how powerful they are in the South. We want you to do a story of Superman on the radio show where he is fighting the KKK, and they are unequivocally presented as being the worst of the worst kinds of villains, because we want the young people of the South, to grow up with that idea. And basically they did it, and the power of the KKK was essentially broken. I mean, I'm sure that was only one of the factors, but it may have been a relatively important one.
Yep.
If you look at
Hearts and minds, yeah.
I would even draw a connection between the whole myth of King Arthur in England's darkest time. Arthur shall come back and arise, the newest manifestation of him. If you look at I'm fascinated by the cargo cults of the Native American Indians, like when it seems clear that they don't have a chance to succeed and that they're going to be wiped out. That's when the mythology of the cargo cults come in, that their gods are going to swoop in and save them. And that's the story that they need to believe to keep on fighting, even when objectively all hope is probably lost. It's their darkest hour and those heroes appear.
Yep. It goes back to the story. We are a storytelling species, and there's just there's no way to know exactly on what level the interaction is, but historians will tell you those stories are the things that motivate and push societies in directions. Like if you control the story, you control the society.
Well, it's like I think I read an interview. I want to say it was Ray Bradbury, where he was talking about the science fiction. The very first science fiction story is like, I want to kill that animal and eat it because I need to survive, but it's a fierce animal, and if I get close to it, it may kill and eat me. I want to use my hand to kill it, but I don't want to be so close to the animal that I'm in danger. And so the first science fiction idea is the spear. Right? What if I could make myself my hand and make my hand sharp, and I could throw my hand away from my body and kill the animal without being in danger myself? That's a science fiction concept.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, science fiction, probably the greatest example of science fiction, of reality catching up to science fiction in real time. There was a television show called, Person of Interest, and it was it had Jim Caviezel in it, and I cannot remember the other guy's name, but the idea was this programmer, after 9/11 had the government had gone to him and they said, look, this was a failure of intelligence. What we need is this computer system that just sees everything and filters through and can tell us where we need to look. And of course there was all these hoops they needed to jump over.
Yeah.
Well, while they were making the show, they're like, they had to keep pushing the stories further and further into these really weird areas, because they're like, as we were doing the show, people were admitting that this was what was actually happening, that there were these computer systems, that they were doing these things, and they're like, yeah, that's why they had to push it to where it had like its own consciousness, and they were trying to push that further and further so it would be science fiction. The problem is, like, this went from being science fiction to documentary real fast, like so literally in real time.
This is kind of like a prototype of AI kind of thing, or
yeah, that was the concept. But
so one of my favorite books is Foucault's Pendulum, written by Umberto Eco.
Yeah,
and the general plot line of it is these Italian intellectuals are studying history. and they come up with this concept. It's kind of like a little bit more of an intellectual Da Vinci Code, but they come up with this concept that maybe it's a little too convenient that the Knights Templar just kind of disappeared overnight, right? Because they were medieval monastic warriors that threatened the church because they could own their own land. What if they just went underground and were still controlling the world and society and secretly pulling all the levers to make all of the world events happen in the past? And they start feeding all of these ideas into a computer. And they say, well, if that were true, then, and they're still in control today, what would start to happen in the future? You know, and they ask the computer to predict what the next logical extension would be in the future. And then everything that the computer starts to predict starts happening. And they have to think like, is this just a coincidence? Or have they actually stumbled onto the world's grandest conspiracy? And, you know, so that's the premise of the book. And it's really, it starts out, I'm not going to lie, the first 100 or so pages are a little dry. But once you get past that, it's like you can't put it down, because it goes from very well-reasoned logic, you know, to you're down the rabbit hole, and you're making these huge jumps in logic right with them, and you know, it's a fascinating book.
Yeah.
That sounds fascinating. What's it called again?
Foucault's Pendulum. It's written by the same guy who wrote The Name of the Rose, and he's a professor of semiotics, which if you ever want to feel intellectually inferior, try to read a couple pages of, you know, I thought something
I see it.
Me when I tried to read about semiotics, because I just, you know,
Foucault.
Yes.
Cool.
Yep.
Pendulum. One of my favorite books was American Gods by Neil Gaiman.
Sure.
I just like the concept of it, just how the gods, all the different gods of all the different pantheons, needed people to think about them and actively engage with them and to pray to them and worship them or whatever, but that they needed to be thought about, like, in order for them to manifest and have their powers.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So the idea was that it was these old gods like Odin and them versus like the new gods, which are what? Technology, the world economy, right?
Yeah.
Media. And they're competing with each other and competing for people's minds. Great book. First season of the show, I loved. I heard the show kind of fell off after that, but yeah, that kind of reminds me about a lot of what we were talking about tonight. Kind of reminds me a lot of that book too, just because.
Yeah.
Like with cargo cults, right? Like people, like all those ancient gods that people used to worship, like Zeus and Odin and them. They probably needed humans more than the humans needed them, because they needed to be manifested.
Well, I think anything that you are obsessed with and constantly think about and meditate on, you will eventually develop some kind of a mystic relationship with that. So if it's the concept of a god that you believe in, or if it's, you know, whatever else could be your interest, you know, you will start to notice strange coincidences and strange bits of serendipity between yourself and that thing that you're constantly thinking about. You know, I mean, I definitely believe in that.
So this kind of goes back a little bit, but I think it's connected here. I've heard a lot of stories. I've interacted with a lot of people who are also artists who work in like horror comics and things like that, right?
Yeah.
And I cannot tell you how often I've heard stories of, I was drawing this monster at 2 a.m. and I get this feeling I'm being watched, and I turn and I look out my back door, and the thing is there looking at me. Right. Or it maybe it's not even the creature itself, but there is a thing that is very similar to what I'm drawing. looking. So it's not even 1-to-1, but there is a thing looking at me, and then it disappears, right? So it's like there is, on some level, again, this goes back to we don't really understand how this place works to begin with. We're getting better at understanding it, but we're probably nowhere near. If we are supernatural creatures, I think that we are, then we have a relationship with the supernatural.
Yeah.
And every culture around the world agrees on this. And that that art interacts with this imaginal realm in a way that we don't yet understand, and are only really starting to have a conversation because over 100 years ago, we decided to all become materialists, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like we're sort of behind. We're having to rediscover this entire conversation, and that's why we have to have these conversations, even if I don't necessarily agree with all the ideas that I've even talked about. That's the point, is we have to play with the concept. You have to explore it. Like that's the thing I think a lot of people miss with, it's like, whether it's philosophy or anything else, you have to interact with a lot of ideas to see, to poke holes, ask questions, play with it, because we don't know what the answer is. Then anything you leave off the table, that may have the clue of the thing you have to pursue to get closer to this truth. And it may be that, until we have that Spookatron 5000, there's no way to know. But we at least have to have the conversation.
5,000.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree wholeheartedly.
So, guys, I think we should wrap this show up, because frankly, I am getting super hungry.
Here.
Yes. I skipped dinner, and I'm like, I can't stop thinking about food right now. So that's what we'll do.
So you're gonna go manifest some dinner?
Dave, we're gonna have to get you back on, and we're gonna have to, because we gotta do. I feel like there are a few more deep dives that we could do and go in a few different directions. Oh, hey there, James. I haven't seen you in a while. Where can people catch you, or where can people find you?
If you want to get my books, Abacab Studios on Etsy is the best place to get them, because then I can send you autographed copies for the same price you'd pay for them on Amazon. And also, if you do a search for Dr. Zomba's Ghostly Tales, that's still currently available through BackerKit. And that'll eventually show up on Etsy as well. But if you want to interact with me, I'm on Twitter, David Lucarelli, and on Facebook as well. Those are kind of my two main socials.
Jason, anything you'd like to plug?
Not at the moment. I'm not doing anything. I'm busy. I'm busy at work and pulling 12 and 14-hour days. So I'm surviving at the moment.
Yeah. And the only thing I would like to plug is what you are watching right now, Donny Cho Sesta. I'll be coming back weekly, same time and place. And no theme song tonight. I'm just gonna hit the button. I gotta eat. All right. Peace out, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks.
And we are